Sir, back there.
Is this on? This subject today is about the legacy of the Reagan administration, and one of the places that President Reagan chose to militarily confront communism happened to be in Central America. It was a place I spent a lot of time in the 1980s.
Sorry, could you identify yourself as well?
Oh, my name is Scott Great Hit. I'm a lawyer and a member of the council. That conflict in Central America, which included Iran, Contra, and the administration's support of the Contras, which I hope one of you will speak about because it's been largely forgotten, I would submit was a primary contributor to the enormous problems we have with immigration right now from Central America. When that conflict ended, it was a few years after U.S.-trained troops murdered 6 Jesuits and 2 members of their household staff at the University of Central America in San Salvador, which happened the week the wall fell in Berlin, at a time when I think most people believed that the era of communism was pretty much over and it was time to end these wars in Central America. So am I correct in asserting that the millions of Central American immigrants who were fleeing conditions of violence, where we left in a place where we left hundreds of thousands of weapons behind, and where tens of thousands of Salvadoran children who grew up in Los Angeles with families who were fleeing the war and when sent back to Central America after inventing gangs called the Salvatruches and others, are terrorizing people.
Okay. Anyone want to address?
I guess I'll just maybe say a couple things about that. I mean, first of all, on immigration, I think, I think you have to acknowledge that, and it seems so beyond what's possible today, but that Reagan was extremely pro-immigration. The term amnesty is part of our vocabulary because Reagan used it as a positive term. He supported amnesty, and he supported robust immigration from Latin America. In terms of how much U.S. policy is responsible for that, I think you'd have to get into a very detailed sort of place-by-place conversation. But one thing I will say is that I don't think Reagan, as his views, particularly in the second term around the Cold War, changed, and he became cooperative with Gorbachev and in favor of radical disarmament. I don't think he went back and updated the rest of his worldview around communism. So he was fully capable of still pursuing a policy that was assuming aggressive Soviet expansionism around the world at a time when the Soviet Union was collapsing, and the Soviets had clearly and explicitly abandoned that policy, if in fact they had even held it in anything like the way he thought they held it before that. And then to just say one word around Contra, I don't think it's forgotten, but I do think it's understudied, and there's a lot of new scholarship on this. This is really interesting. But going back through the record, the thing that struck me about Iran-Contra was how much it was an outgrowth of Reagan's personalized approach to foreign policy, in particular his obsession with the American hostages in Lebanon. Reagan had a kind of paternalistic view of his role as president that included the idea that he had a level of responsibility for every American citizen. And it gnawed at him that these Americans, including the CIA agent undercover and others who represented the American government, were being held hostage in these terrible conditions. And he would sometimes start these National Security Council meetings with the question, how are my hostages? My hostages. And I think it was his focus on these individual human beings that in some ways propelled the first part, the Iran part, not the Contra part, which to this day I don't think we have evidence that he knew about. But the arms for hostages part was an outgrowth of his focus on the hostages.
Let's have another question. Sir, in the back there.